Hello and welcome to the final session of the marriage preparation course. Did you know that kissing is good for you?
According to scientists, frequent kissing stabilises cardiovascular activity and decreases high blood pressure and cholesterol.
There are several other medical benefits. On the dentistry front, kissing fights plaque and prevents cavities because the extra saliva helps clean out your mouth.
And on the diet front, apparently we lose 12 calories during every passionate kiss. So 3 kisses a day of 20 seconds each will be enough to make you lose a whole pound in weight.
Clearly, the record holders for the longest kiss ever realised that there were benefits. The Guinness Book of Records listed that their kiss lasted an incredible 417 hours. And one final encouragement about kissing. Apparently, our brains have special neurons that help us find each other's lips in the dark. I find that immensely reassuring.
This session, we're going to be looking at how shared goals and values strengthen our relationship.
Marriage provides us with one of the greatest opportunities in life and one of its greatest challenges.
The opportunity to build the most intimate of relationships.
And the challenge to learn what it means to love another person, to look beyond our own needs, to find out what is important to them and then to make adjustments as a result, doing things that mean a lot to them, not doing other things that upset them.
I've never been very good at a three-legged race. I mean, running on your own is one thing, but when you've got to put one foot in front of you with someone tied next to you, well, that's a whole different... But people say marriage is a bit like a three-legged race. You're no longer two individuals making your own decisions and running your own lives, but a couple that needs to move forward together in unison.
You're not running on your own, you're running with someone else. And it feels uncomfortable at times and really difficult, and you fall many times. But when you get the right pace and you've got your stride in unison and the rhythms flowing, then there's fantastic advancement, and it's a lot of fun and it brings a lot of joy.
I found that if I'm going to get good at anything, then I need some training, whether it's a three-legged race, playing tennis, or learning to use my computer. A helping hand from a professional, at least someone who knows more than I do. But how many married couples seek help and support to build a strong marriage, and where do they turn?
We've been married about 14 years and we've got a good marriage, but 2 years ago Joe decided that it'd be good to go on a marriage course to concentrate a bit more on ourselves and a bit more on our marriage because we've got 4 children and lead busy lives and stuff. So I agreed, and so we went on the marriage course and it was really good.
Yeah, we found the whole course really helpful. It's made a real difference, a real improvement to our marriage. One thing we found really good was the area of conflict, and we realised in the course that when we argued, we were arguing about how we were arguing and not the issues. And it's given us the tools to deal with conflict and to get to the nitty-gritty of what the matter is and to resolve it well and quickly.
We're definitely getting better at this, so it seems that if you want a strong and healthy marriage that lasts the distance, it's worth investing time and effort in making your relationship work. Going on a marriage course 2 years into marriage is one thing you may want to consider, and it also helps to have friends and family around you to encourage and spur you on.
We're going to look now at 4 things that enable us to match our strides to each other in marriage.
First, marriage involves changing our behaviour.
I remember some years ago saying to my wife, Diane, darling, if you could change anything at all about me, what would it be? I rather hoped she would have to think about it for a while, but Diane didn't hesitate. She said, darling, when you shave, you always leave the stubble around the sink. And she said, I'm not sure exactly how you do it, but you get shaving foam up the wall higher than head height. And you always roll the towel in a wet ball and throw it in the bath. I would like you to remove the stubble and the foam, fold the towel up and put it over the radiator. And I can remember saying, is that it? And she said, that will do for starters. And I thought so much about that. At that time, Diane wasn't working outside the home. She has worked outside the home, but just then, she was a full-time homemaker. And I can imagine her saying to herself, you know, Rob, just now, looking after the home is my job. Tidying the place and just looking after you and the kids, and I get a lot of my identity from that. And when you and the kids treat the place as though Hurricane Flora has just visited us, what you say to me is, what I do doesn't matter. And Rob, what you're really saying to me is, who I am doesn't matter. And it dawned on me that day that although there were no doubt big things I had to change, it was by some of these small things that Diane actually made a judgment of whether or not she really mattered to me.
Loving means going on listening to our husband or wife and going on adapting our behaviour for their sake.
Our attitude in marriage has to be expecting to give more than we take. That kind of loving is costly and will inevitably mean us having to make sacrifices. But at the end of the day, learning to love is what life is all about. And marriage, as we said before, is probably the best training ground for it.
What I've learned is that some people don't like to watch every football match that's shown on the television, which is quite strange, but so I now try to make sure that I don't watch every match that's in the box. I watch the odd match because you've got to spend quality time in the evenings with your partner. So, I mean, that's something that I've learned that I didn't really, realise when I first met, Hazel's not a fan of sport as such, so that's something that I've had to learn, that it's not just about what I want, it's about what we want as a couple as well.
First, marriage involves being prepared to change our behaviour.
Second, marriage involves being healed of our past. We all come into marriage carrying with us influences from our background, some positive, some negative. Sometimes, without realising it, these experiences may cause us to overreact.
If we were repeatedly criticised as a child or in a previous relationship, we may overreact when our husband or wife asks us to change some aspect of our behaviour.
If we felt controlled in the past, we may overreact when our husband or wife suggests a plan of action without consulting us first.
Or if we felt abandoned by a parent, we may overreact the first time our partner turns up late. And we need to look at our own reactions and ask, is that reasonable? Is that in proportion to the situation?
And change is possible, although generally, change only happens gradually. But as we talk about why we react as we do and forgive those who've hurt us or let us down in the past, we start to change. So secondly, marriage involves being healed of our past.
Thirdly, marriage involves letting go of unrealistic expectations. Some of us come into marriage expecting our partner to love us perfectly and to meet all of our needs. This may be because we have an unrealistic view of marriage, or maybe because we've watched too many romantic movies.
Or we may have unmet emotional needs from our childhood. Maybe we didn't receive much affirmation, encouragement, attention, or were not loved unconditionally by our parents.
If we come into marriage expecting our husband or wife to fulfill our craving for these unmet childhood needs, we're putting unrealistic expectations onto them. Our husband or wife can never be the perfect mother or the perfect father we didn't have. They can't even be the perfect husband or the perfect wife. We all have faults.
And if we expect perfection, we'll never be satisfied.
We live in a consumer society, and sometimes we believe we have the right to perfection, even in our marriage. And sometimes when we're going through tough times, we'll think, why don't I feel in love? The person I should have married is out there somewhere. They're a sexual athlete, they're great at DIY, they'll be stronger with the kids than my husband or my wife. And I think sometimes it's that elusive, mythical person that we chase. And sometimes people will go through relationship after relationship just looking for that perfect person.
Unrealistic expectations of our husband or wife will lead to a destructive downward spiral.
We'll start to make demands of each other. And those demands won't be met, as no one individual can meet all of our needs. We'll then be disappointed, and the disappointment will lead to blame and to criticism.
When we get married, we still need other sources of affirmation. That's why we've found that looking to God to meet our deepest needs makes such a difference, and we'll look more at that later. In marriage, we still need other things that excite us and motivate us, such as our jobs, our hobbies, and other interests. Thirdly, then, marriage involves letting go of unrealistic expectations.
Fourthly, marriage involves showing appreciation on a daily basis. No marriage can survive a lack of appreciation.
Our fiancé must know without question that we believe in them, that we're for them. We must be each other's fans rather than each other's critics.
I definitely think that we are each other's number one fan, but I think that's definitely learned behaviour. I think prior to getting married, you have lots of other people that you champion. But being married, you realise that feeling like someone's number one is the best feeling in the world, and it's about understanding what you have to say or to do to make them feel that important.
An expert on relationships, Professor John Gottman, who runs a research group called the Love Laboratory, says that for every one critical remark, there needs to be at least 5 positive ones.
Expressing appreciation for our husband or wife needs to be a daily habit, including on those days when we're not feeling like it, when we're feeling stressed or grumpy. Apparently, it takes 6 weeks to make or break a habit. So the way we speak and react to each other will quickly become a pattern in our marriage.
We've noticed that the more we express genuine appreciation to each other, the more appreciative we become of each other.
I think it's really important that when you get married that actually you show appreciation for the other person, that you don't take that person for granted, because it's so easy when you live with them on a day-to-day basis, you just get used to the good things that they do. So for example, Jason's a really good cook, and at the start of the relationship I'd just be oohing and aahing at his food because it was just so tasty and delicious and creative, but after a while I just get used to that high level of food quality. And I just forget to say thank you. I might even be critical about certain elements. But I've learned again that actually the challenge is to not take that person for granted, to remember that they're special and unique, and just to, when they do something good, just to compliment them and affirm it to them.
I think Amy shows appreciation to me quite often. She leaves me notes if she leaves the house before I do in the morning. She'll often email me with words of encouragement, and I try and reciprocate that. And I guess I'm more of a text man myself. I tend to text Amy sometimes just with words of encouragement, or sometimes to say I love her, just for no particular reason, just out of the blue, just to kind of keep it going.
We want you to turn in your manuals to the first exercise of this session, expressing appreciation, and we hope it's the most enjoyable exercise of the whole course. What we want you to do is to write down 8 things that you appreciate about your fiancé. And when you've both finished, take it in turns to read out loud to each other what you've written down. And we're going to give you 10 minutes to do this.
We're now going to look at working out our values. That is, what are our priorities in life, individually and as a couple? It's important to look at our values, as these determine the decisions we make about our lifestyle.
And it's our values that affect the choices we make, such as how we spend our time or our money.
For example, whether we spend money on a holiday or redecorating the house, how much energy we devote to our family, to work, to the garden, to developing our spiritual lives.
And our values will affect whether we seek as big a wage or salary as we can, or opt for less stress and a lower standard of living.
In a marriage, a couple may well have very different personalities, develop different gifts, come from different backgrounds, have a number of different interests. But if we have the same core values and a common purpose, we can build a strong marriage.
Working out our values, though, takes time. It means talking about our dreams, our aspirations, our hopes, our longings. It's well worth setting aside time to discuss what's most important to us and then to review our conclusions from time to time.
I'm not sure if we have a vision for a marriage as such, but we certainly have some objectives that we want to try and achieve as a couple, and in our part of our marriage preparation,
not that we're achievement orientated or anything.
We came up with some sort of objectives during our marriage preparation, and we sort of review them on an annual basis.
Yeah, it's been actually really helpful to write down some of the things. What is it that makes a marriage successful? What are those things that we are aiming to do for each other? How do we intend to encourage each other? And what does build us up?
Yeah, because I think it's pointed out to us some things that we're not currently doing, which is maybe affecting us in the short and certainly in the longer term, like maybe not spending enough time on our own or doing our own personal interests. Because since we got married, we've spent a lot of time together. So, you know, we need, it helps bring a balance and a sort of check to
So we
things,
plan to review those every year because, you know, obviously they're not cast in stone, but it just helps to remind ourselves what we think we're doing and why. Yeah.
As we work out what matters most to us, our core values, we're better equipped to make major decisions together, and we'll substantially reduce conflict between us. Scilla and I didn't do a marriage preparation course before we got married. However, a year into marriage, we went away on a weekend with 5 other couples, all friends of ours and all recently married, to get some practical advice from an older couple. At that time, I was teaching while Scilla was still at art college.
On that weekend, we were asked to work out the value we gave to different areas of our lives and to put them in a list in order of priority.
By the end of the 2 days, Scilla and I had agreed on the order of 5 things that were most important to us.
Top of the list, we put our relationship with God, because our shared faith is our highest value. It affects all our decisions and what we're aiming at in life.
Secondly, we put our marriage relationship, as we recognise that we need to give time to loving and supporting each other over and above every other relationship.
Thirdly, we wrote down children, if and when we had them.
Fourthly, we put our jobs, or for Scilla at the time, art college.
And fifthly, we put our involvement with our church community. We recognised how much we enjoyed our involvement there, but saw how easily it could take up most of our free time, so that the things higher up on the list might be neglected as a result.
Even before the weekend, we realised we weren't managing our time very well. We found there was just so much going on in our lives, our jobs and studies, our friends and families, our activities with the church, our desire to keep fit and to play sport. And all of this was before we'd even thought about having children.
Making that list of our 5 priorities helped us to live more in line with our values. One decision it affected, bizarrely, was what type of car we had.
When we were first married, we had an old Renault 4. And not many of our friends had cars then. And we were constantly picking people up and dropping them off, ferrying groups of people to parties the other side of London and taking them home at all hours in the morning, which actually we enjoyed.
Unsurprisingly, though, this old Renault started to fall apart and we needed a new car. We had about £200 to spend. Back in 1977, it was a lot of money. It was just under Nicky's monthly salary. A cousin of mine told us that he was thinking of selling his old sports car for about double that amount. We were a bit worried about the price and about how we were going to keep up our taxi service with so much less space. Then suddenly we both realised a 2-seater car was the perfect answer to the increasing problem of never having any time on our own. I can't quite remember how we sorted out the money issue, but we bought the car.
I'm sure I had some money stashed away somewhere for such eventualities. Anyway, that summer we drove 5,000 miles to Greece and back in that sports car, breaking down roughly every 400 miles. The challenge of keeping the car going, different expectations about whether we slept beside the road, generally my preference, or stayed in a hostel, usually Scilla's idea, and the intense heat probably made it the most challenging weeks of our marriage. But we had lots of time together and we never regretted the decision about buying that car.
The point is, as much as we value our friends and enjoy helping other people, having made our list of priorities, we realised the car was going to be a great way of ensuring we spent time alone together. Admittedly, there probably were other ways we could have done it.
More generally, we know that unless we'd worked out our core values and literally written down that list of the top 5, we'd have struggled a lot with making time for our priorities.
Even now, when the urgent things in our lives take over, those things that shout the loudest, when life just goes crashing on, when we find that one or other of us gets overtired and out of sorts, then we have to go back to our list.
And that list helps us to say no where we need to say no, in order to get our lives going better again.
We want to look at the value we place on the 3 areas of friendships, children and jobs.
First of all then, friendships. Of course, we need time on our own as a couple, but that doesn't mean cutting ourselves off from others. As we've said, we really value our friendships.
We have a number of couples and single friends who we're very close to, and it's enriched our life and our marriage to be open with them about whatever we're going through, to compare notes, to admit our failures to each other, to laugh together and so on.
We'd recommend that you're careful about who you spend time with, particularly in the early stages. as all of our relationships must be redefined in the light of our marriage. And this will mean being open and honest with each other about who we're with when we're apart. And often it's a lack of information that can breed mistrust.
I have had to sort through issues of trust initially when we got married, because Anthony had a very active social life at work, and I felt very left out of it because partners weren't allowed. And we did have a lot of issues and discussions about it. And we did deal with them by me meeting some of his friends, and by him actually not spending so much time out.
I think the important issue was that you didn't know, Annie didn't know what was going on. So as soon as we sat down, chatted, she got to meet a few of my work colleagues, it was resolved. But it was the unknown that I think was perhaps the problem.
The second area we want to look at is the value we place on children, if and when we have them. As we said in session 2, marriage is a vital factor in their welfare and security. They are the principal beneficiaries of a loving, stable marriage between their mother and father.
I remember an engaged couple saying to us that they'd observed the effect on friends' marriages when children came along. They noticed that the couples didn't seem to have time for each other any longer and had started to grow apart. So they decided they were not going to have children because they didn't want children to push them apart.
Certainly, couples with young children have to make more of an effort to carve out marriage time. But marriages grow through what we share, and there's nothing that we share more than our children.
Judith Wallerstein, who's widely considered to be the world's leading authority on the effects of divorce on children, has also carried out extensive research into what makes a strong marriage. She interviewed 50 couples, all with successful marriages, to discover what they had in common. And this is what she wrote in her conclusion. Many talked about the family that they'd created together. All felt that creating the marriage and the family was the major commitment of their adult life. For most, marriage and children were the achievements in which they took the greatest pride.
Children can draw a couple closer together or push them apart. Putting a high value on family life means having to work out quite deliberately time for each other as well as time with the children.
Spending time together has been an issue we've had to work out, especially since we've had a child. Phoebe came along 6 years ago, and that had a massive impact on our lives, obviously. But one of the areas that it did impact was prioritising the time that we can spend together. Because before we were just, selfishly we'd just be with each other all the time. We were always with each other, doing things together. And then we realised that we had to prioritise time because it wasn't as freely available as it used to be.
The third area is the value we place on our jobs. Marriage is not about competing with each other.
It's not my career versus your career.
Rather, we should be thinking, how can I help my husband or wife to fulfil the God-given gifts and potential they have?
With that attitude, marriage is not restrictive but liberating. It means that we can work out how we balance the demands of our respective jobs. It's also worth talking together about whether you both expect to carry on working full-time if and when children come along.
50 years ago, husband and wife tended each to have clear roles. The husband expected to be the wage earner, while the wife expected to be the full-time homemaker and childcarer.
But today, those expectations have changed, and each couple has to work it out for themselves. Certainly, there are more opportunities today for couples to be creative. For example, one of them could work part-time for a while or work from home so as to be there for the children.
It's clear that preschool children thrive on the full-time care of a parent. Sometimes parents have no option but to work a full day, especially lone parents. But it's increasingly become the norm in our society for both parents to expect to work full-time.
The Trade and Industry Secretary, Patricia Hewitt, was quoted as saying this recently: "When I look back, I wish I had worked part-time when my children were younger. I had a live-in nanny, but I always loved being with my children. And if I had my time again, I would do more."
We'd encourage you to think through together what value you put on work and children, and to take a long-term view so that you don't have similar regrets in years to come.
Talking about our values draws us closer together and helps us shape our decisions about small, everyday issues or radical and life-changing ones.
Well, 6 years ago, we went away for a weekend to work out our values. And I think what we saw in that process was that before we were sort of like these two individuals in a marriage just chugging along, doing our various things. but we'd never really come together and said what was important to us as a couple. So I felt we sort of went into the weekend as two I's and we came out really as a we. And that was very, very important.
Yeah, it's great. A couple of things we decided was that I really saw that I valued spending time with the family and having a particular vocation that I was really wanted to do, but I hadn't been doing for years and years and years. Those are way more important than the career I'd been doing, which was making money, but wasn't really that satisfying anymore. So actually on the Monday morning, I went in and resigned my job. And I'd always wanted to work with Deb and spend more time with our daughter, who was delighted. She said, "Oh, you're not a nighttime daddy anymore." It's fantastic. So it just really worked. And yeah, it just really worked out.
In today's me-centered culture, the overriding question is, how can I be happy? How can I be fulfilled? But happiness is a byproduct of a good marriage, not the central purpose.
Before you do the next exercise, we're going to read a piece that has inspired us each time we hear it.
It was written by a man called Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a German pastor who was imprisoned during the last war for his opposition to the Third Reich and tragically put to death just before the end of the war. But while he was in prison, his niece got married, and had he been free, he would have taken her wedding. However, he wrote a sermon that was smuggled out the night before and was read out at the service. This is part of what he wrote.
Marriage is more than your love for each other. It has a higher dignity and power, for it is God's holy ordinance through which He wills to perpetuate the human race until the end of time. In your love, you see only your two selves in the world. But in your marriage, you are a link in the chain of the generations, which God causes to come and to pass away to His glory and calls into His kingdom. In your love, you see only the heaven of your happiness. But in marriage, you are placed at a post of responsibility towards the world and mankind. Your love is your own private possession. But marriage is more than something personal. It is a status, an office.
Our conviction is that there's a God-given purpose for our marriage. Rather than just living out our lives day by day, we need to dream dreams together about our future and talk about what we hope to achieve together.
In this way, every couple can develop a vision for their marriage.
We want you to turn to the exercise, Living Out Your Values. Try to write a list of your top 5 values and then put against each value one way that you hope to live that out when you're married. Now, your list may look different to ours, so you'll see we've put some suggestions of possible values to help you think through what your highest priorities in life might be.
And it's so important that we come into marriage having identified and agreed on our core values. Now, it'll probably take you longer than you have time for during this session, but we'd encourage you to make a start. Developing a successful partnership involves working out which roles each of us will take on and which roles we'll share, with the understanding that marriage is an equal partnership.
We went to the north of England to discover people's views on the roles men and women should play in marriage.
Do I think there should be different roles between a man and a woman? No. No.
What's the thing? I don't think there should be any difference between the roles of man and woman.
I think man is in charge of the house, I believe.
I don't think there should be a role, but I think it helps often if there is.
But then every relationship's different. It's about how two people fit together. I think especially in this century, in this day and age.
It's getting more and more like an equal thing now, you know.
I think the roles between husband and wife are just the same. It depends, it really does depend.
I think women are becoming very demanding, very assertive, and they are forgetting that men needs respect.
Both have equal parts, both have the same commitments in marriage, the same trust factors, the same love.
I think there used to be now, but I think it's sort of changing more in this day and age.
I think it's pretty much evening out these days. The women can, in some cases, contribute financially to a relationship where the husband will take care of the other side of the relationship and vice versa.
Years ago, like in my grandparents' time, the man was a breadwinner and the woman was the one who looks after the house, kept the castle, kept the kids, and the man used to go out to work and take his flat cap off when he came home.
Everything's changed now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's all getting like women's equality now, you know.
Equal rights.
In some cases, the women are the breadwinner more than the men. You have to look around and you can see, you know.
When roles are unclear, it can all too quickly lead to conflict, particularly in the first few years of marriage.
We have to work out who does what, who decides what, and who takes the lead on those things that have to be done, such as managing the finances, doing the housework, the cooking, maintaining the car, organising holidays and so on.
How will you make the very big decisions, such as where you live, how you use your money? Is it going to be one or other of you holding the casting vote, or both of you making these decisions together with an equal say?
Unless we work out these roles together, we'll come into marriage either assuming we'll organise our marriage in the same way that our parents organised theirs, or, if we found theirs a bad model, determined to do it completely differently.
When we were first married, I had that kind of traditional expectation of what our marriage would be like. I really expected to be cooking and making choices about colours and how we decorated our home, for example.
But I actually like cooking a lot, so I hoped to take that role, and I also enjoy shopping for food. So now I do that every week. But I hate the laundry.
And I really don't mind the laundry, so that's worked out quite well. And another thing that I do is it's my job to look after the car, so I have to take it to the garage and make sure it's feeling fine. But I think a lot of our friends look at us and are a little bit surprised by that, but it really works quite well for us. We just do what we enjoy doing.
It took Scilla and myself several years of marriage to recognise that even with the trivial aspects of life, we had different expectations from each other, as a result of the roles that each of our own parents undertook in their respective marriages.
For example, in my parents' marriage, my father is the main organiser. He plans any parties they have. He invites people to do things. He posts the letters, answers the invitations, and fills the car up.
But in my parents' marriage, it was my mother who was the main organiser, and particularly the initiator of their social lives. She organised parties, invited people to do things, posted the letters, and she was more likely than my father to keep the car filled up. So when we got married, subconsciously I assumed that Scilla would organise things as my mother had. I assumed this was the wife's role.
Meanwhile, I thought it was the husband's role, and I expected Nicky to organise these things just like my father had.
It took 10 years of marriage for us to realise why nothing ever happened in our lives. We were constantly waiting for the other to take responsibility and organise it. It really helps to talk about our expectations, who will do what, before we get married.
When we first got married, we did work quite hard on having an equal partnership. We even went as far as drawing up a list of chores in the house and literally dividing it straight down the middle, dividing them between